No! No!
Maybe you should break earlier next time, boss.
Let me know you're okay.
Really, Tony? Hello my friends and welcome to one of the most useless HDR in-game slider what I have seen in a game so far. Welcome to Formula 1 2021. When you're starting the game for the very first time and you play on a HDR screen like the HGiG, you get this HDR calibration menu and the instruction actually telling us adjust the slider until you can no longer see a difference between the two halves of the image, and I'm just assuming they're talking about this or those two halves here, and we like to bring them together. That means we need to get rid of this gray line between the two halves. So on my HGiG, I'm not capable of doing this, not at all, because there is no change at all, nothing at all. So the standard settings, by the way, is 10, so that's when you start the game. And I'm not saying this menu is completely useless, because I know there are TVs out there or monitors out there, they have a much higher peak brightness than the HGiG, so up to 1500, whatever. You get my point. So maybe it's working for them, but the majority of the people, they're using a monitor to play, and I'm very sure the peak brightness capability from those monitors are way below the peak brightness capability from the HGiG. So I really have no idea how this should work for the majority of the people here. So the only reason or change what I can see is when I'm lowering this below 5 actually. So 5 is where I can see something is changing actually on the screen. So not here, I'm not even talking about here, because it looks like this stays exactly the same all the time. The peak brightness from the white background is actually changing. So for me at this very moment, as a HGiG user, one of the most useless HDR calibration menu I ever had in a game. But let's start from the very beginning. Let's talk about the internal HDR calibration menus on both consoles, the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. Was I able to see any difference in the game when I changed the settings in those menus? No, not at all. It really doesn't matter what you set up here. It will not affect the game at all. So that doesn't mean that HGiG can't work as it should be, okay? So we need to consider this. But what I found, unfortunately, on both versions, as soon you're using HDR, you have raised black. And the problem is, in this case, I had actually to remove or to decrease my maximum brightness, or not the maximum brightness, but the brightness usually is standard 50. To get my perfect OLED black back, I had to actually decrease this to 48. So unfortunately, not the only game where we experiencing problems with HDR. But let's say it like this, because most of the time you're playing in a very bright environment. So of course there are night erasers as well, but most of the time it's very, very bright. It's really not that affecting the overall experience. Okay, so let's jump straight into my in-game HDR settings on both consoles. On the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, I found actually that peak nit adjustment 50 is the way to go on my HGiG. So the problem is really this menu or this adjustment setting is really absolutely useless, because again, so standard is actually really 10. And I will show you in a moment a little bit more what you're losing actually when you leave this on 10. But what you can see again, when you're decreasing this actually below 5, then you can actually see, hopefully, that white is not getting white, and you're losing actually a couple of details as well. And even when I'm looking very, very close, when I'm increasing this now, I'm getting more details on the white line. And what I found with my meter, what I measured, the maximum peak brightness is really clipping out or stopping at 50. So when I'm reducing this to, let's say, 47, I had less maximum peak brightness on those lights, and with 50 it was just the maximum, around 680 candela, which I never measured before in a game. So this is, I think, most of the most highest peak brightness in a game what I measured so far. So I did of course comparison HGiG versus dynamic tone mapping, and also of course on the Xbox Series X Dolby Vision. So spoiler alert, I couldn't find a difference in terms of Dolby Vision versus HGiG, but as always there's a big difference when it comes to dynamic tone mapping versus HGiG. For this game I'm recommending using HGiG over dynamic tone mapping, because as we know, dynamic tone mapping is analyzing the screen or the picture information all the time, and it will adjust the maximum brightness from the screen according to the information. And at this very moment it's doing actually a very bad job, because it will dim the screen because there are so many bright objects on the screen, and you will end up with a not a very nice HDR picture. HGiG at this very moment is really doing a great job. And just to show you something, when we're just moving a little bit in this direction, we're looking into nowhere. There is actually supposed to be black sky or whatever. So because we're raising in the midnight, and we're now changing this to dynamic tone mapping, you can see what dynamic tone mapping is actually doing. Brighten up the picture like crazy. And again, we're raising at midnight with a clear sky, but it's not supposed to be that bright, and also it will over brighten the nice effects in the background and you will lose some details. So HGiG is the way to go in this game. Same track, different car, different time of the day, and dynamic tone mapping is doing exactly the same thing as when we're playing at midnight. It will dim the screen. So right now I set the game to clear sky and midday, and as you can see, HGiG is more brighter as dynamic tone mapping, and this is happening almost through the whole game. Dynamic tone mapping is just not doing the right thing in my opinion in this game, because we are talking about very bright game actually, and it is always dimming, as you can see, always dimming. So if you can play this game in HGiG, and of course we're talking about Dolby Vision in a second. So what I like to show you is when you actually change this to the standard settings, or when you leave this on the standard settings on a HGiG, and I'm very sure this happens with a different TV as well, then you actually lose really a lot of the maximum peak brightness. Can you see now that there is almost no difference anymore between HGiG and dynamic tone mapping? Actually, there is no increasement in maximum peak brightness at all between those. So again, what I have to say, of course, is that in the middle of the night, when I played at midnight and I did my measurements, then yes, dynamic tone mapping in some of the cases was brighter than HGiG, but this was really just the case when I was measuring something like that, just like that. Then it was around maybe 20-30 candela nits brighter, but at the end it really doesn't matter, because the overall, look at this, HGiG is much brighter at this very moment than dynamic tone mapping, and this is what I like to have. HGiG is really doing a great job in this game, and I really like the game. I love it. On both consoles, PlayStation 5 and the Xbox, it looks just fantastic. And this is the quality mode, because I did all my testing in quality. And I will do a different video about PlayStation 5 versus Xbox, of course, as well. And now let's talk about Dolby Vision. Okay, so what about Dolby Vision? Was there any difference between HGiG, Dolby Vision, dynamic tone mapping? Of course, dynamic tone mapping is changing all the time the brightness, but Dolby Vision versus HGiG, is there a difference? And yes, I'm well aware of that. This game is most likely not mastered or rendered in Dolby Vision, but that doesn't mean it will not doing a great job. And Dolby Vision on the Xbox Series X on my HGiG looks fantastic, and I was not able to see a difference between PlayStation 5 version, which is set to HGiG at this very moment with the same in-game settings 50, and Dolby Vision on the Xbox Series X, also settings to 50. I was not able to see a difference, not at all, not in terms of colors, not in terms of maximum peak brightness. There is no difference, and this is bothering me, because can you hear this? This is I'm talking about this feature, and this is not bugging me actually, this is great. I'm talking about this feature in my next video when I'm comparing the versions, because, spoiler alert, this is great. So anyway, so HGiG versus Dolby Vision, in my opinion, no difference at all. You can play both, and my recommendation is still HGiG over dynamic tone mapping and Dolby Vision over dynamic tone mapping as well. Okay, I think that's enough for this video, because I need to prepare my next video where I compare the two versions. That's at the moment is the PlayStation 5 version, and both versions really looking great and driving great. And I know I'm playing a little bit with, I changed all the rules, or turned off the rules for doing my videos, because the rules are ridiculous. You can't even park somewhere, you know what I mean? You have to drive all the time. What's that for a rule? I mean, come on. But anyway, this is just really amazing, and I'm looking forward to do the next video. So, oh my god, okay, this was my front. Yeah, okay.
Are you okay? That was a big one. Confirm you're okay, please.
Yeah, I'm confirming I'm okay, okay. So anyway, so thank you very much for watching me for this video, and I would much appreciate it, of course, if you're new to my channel, leave me a like, leave me a comment and subscribe to my channel. Much appreciated, okay? And I see you guys in my next video. Thank you very much. See you. Bye.